A 100-pound bear in Jameson City, Pennsylvania, got into more trouble than he expected. You see, he was maybe just wandering around the city when he found this beautiful-looking red jar, and inside of it was just a little bit of oil. And of course, you know he's a bear, and you know he wants that oil, so what did he do? He stuck his head down inside that jar to get the oil and found himself to be trapped. That's right. He trapped himself in that jar for more than 11 days. Or maybe about 11 days. He was wandering around. The city residents saw him wandering around with this red jar jammed onto his head that he could not remove. He evaded the DNR officers, but a guy named Mike Gerbila pursued after him with a group of about 3 other people with a rope and flashlights way back on June 3rd of 2013. He said he knew that where he was because he kept running into things. He's hitting trees and boulders and all these other things like that. And so they kept finding him and pursuing after him. Finally, they trapped him in the resident's backyard where he fell into a pool once or twice. They finally wrangled him down when Jody Boyle, another one of the group, was able to yank that jar off his head. Now, a few more days with that on his head and things would have turned out really, really bad for that bear. Now, apparently, unbeknownst to us, the world is full of bear traps, and that could have caused him to die. And the truth is, the world is full of traps for us also, isn't it? From people who are con men that just want to get our money to those who are, who lie to us to make themselves feel good about themselves, or the world's temptations to get us to follow it instead of God. This world has traps for all of us. There are many pitfalls to avoid. And in our passage today, we're going to see Jesus expertly avoiding traps set for him. And perhaps we can get a few pointers for ourselves. So remember, we're still working through our series on Evangel. 2 weeks ago, we were talking about that passage where Jesus tells the parable about God's outrageous, gracious love towards the people who are residents in his vineyard. And of course, the chief priests, the elders, they were not happy about that because they did not come out looking very good at the end of that particular parable. And so we're just going through this Evangel series, which is the declaration of Jesus Christ as the Son of God and how he established the kingdom of God on earth, how he overthrew his enemy and reopened the opportunity for us to be in a relationship with God. In this passage, we're going to see how the enemy is trying to trap Jesus. And let's be honest, this was a war. We often forget when we read the Gospels that this was war. And it was spiritual in its nature. I get that, but it was still war. And Jesus had overcome the temptations early on. And if Jesus wasn't going to fall prey to moral depravity, if he couldn't be destroyed morally, which is what Jesus' enemy wanted to do, then the best next option is to what? Attempt to make him hated. So let's take a look at the passage today. We're still in Mark chapter 12. We're going to verse 13. And we're just going to walk through it passage by passage, chunk by chunk, as we like to do at times. But before we go any further, let's pause and let's pray. Father, we come before you and we thank you for this opportunity that we have to look into your word together. And we ask, Father, simply that you speak to us, challenge us, guide us, convict us, Lord. Help us to walk better with you. Open our eyes to how we can avoid the traps that are set before us. We ask these things in your name. Amen. Let's take a look. Mark chapter 12, we're going to start in verse 13, and it says, "And they sent to him some of the Pharisees and some of the Herodians to trap him in his talk. Now, back when we started this series in Evangel, I mentioned that sometimes we misunderstand the Pharisees, that sometimes they were legitimately asking questions because they were confused, like, why is Jesus eating with all of these people over here, right? But that kind of ended in like Mark 3:6, about a couple months into Jesus' ministry, maybe 7 or 8 months into Jesus' ministry, when Jesus heals somebody on the Sabbath, and we're told in Mark 3:6, that at that point the Pharisees and the Herodians began to work together to find ways to destroy Jesus' ministry. But who were the Pharisees and the Herodians? So let's pause for a second, just make sure we understand who the players are in this particular drama. And so the Pharisees, we mentioned before, were a group of people who were concerned with being holy. They took Jesus' call for us to, or God's call for us to be holy as he is holy, very seriously. And in their opinion, the best way to accomplish that was what? Rules. Follow all the rules and make more rules. In fact, this is not that different from how evangelicals tried to be holy at one point in time. In fact, we had a whole holiness movement amongst the evangelicals where we did exactly this. We made rules for us to follow. Don't drink, don't do this, don't go to movies, don't play card games, don't do this and that. And we thought if we followed enough rules, that would help us to be holy. And that's exactly what the Pharisees did in their system. And in particular for this topic, we need to understand that the Pharisees felt that to be with a Gentile was for them to become unclean. It was to destroy their holiness. And so they avoided contact with Gentiles. And they didn't like the Romans. They didn't really want to pay taxes to the Romans, but they did to kind of keep things smooth, right? They didn't want to ruffle the feather. I don't know. They didn't want to make waves, so to speak. Now, on the other hand, we have the Herodians, and perhaps you picked up by the name Herodians that they have a different view on Romans. Like, they supported Herod and Herod's children. In fact, some of them may have gone so far as to believe that Herod was the Messiah. And they supported the taxes. They supported all things government. So these two groups working together, they oftentimes were head to head. The fact that they were coming together was just as in one of those kind of incredible political religious combinations where they would normally be at odds with each other. And their goal, we are told in verse 13, was to trap Jesus. Now that word is exactly what it says. In fact, this word is the only time it's used in the Bible is this passage, and it means exactly what it sounds like. It's to trap an animal or fish or bird. And in essence, Jesus had become the big one that they're trying to bring down. Now, if you're a hunter and you've got your game cams out there and you're getting pictures of all the deer that are in the area, and you see those big, like 12, 14-point bucks, and you're like, I'm going to get that one this year, right? That's what they were doing. They were doing that with Jesus. Jesus is the big one, and open season had just been declared. It's time to bring down Jesus, and these aren't going to be the only ones who try to trap Jesus. They're just the first ones. So let's see what their hunting tactics are, all right? We're in verse 14, and this is what it says. And they came and said to him, Teacher, we know that you are true and do not care about anyone's opinion, for you are not swayed by appearances, but truly teach the way of God. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? Should we pay them or should we not? So they start with what is obviously flattery. And this, of course, is a very biblical trap. In fact, Proverbs warns us about flattery oftentimes. And actually it says in verse 29:5, those who flatter their neighbors are spreading nets for their feet. So this is an obvious trap. They're starting with flattery. And of course it feels good to be flattered, but this flattery must have come across as extremely empty. I mean, their whole goal is to get Jesus' head big enough for him to respond to this question before he thinks about it. And if he responds badly, he's either going to lose his followers or he could be thrown into jail. Flattery, of course, is always something that we've got to be careful about. We've all been at the receiving end of flattery and know that when someone who doesn't see eye to eye with us is flattering us, that sends up the warning flags, doesn't it? It's much more dangerous when we're getting flattered by someone we think is our friend, think is our family, think that they care about us. And we don't even realize sometimes that flattery is just buttering us up. And here, this flattery that they were giving to Jesus must have almost come across more as sarcasm. Like these Pharisees and Herodians had been pursuing Jesus for so long, it must have been completely empty. But what exactly was the trap? Why ask him about taxes? How is that a trap? Well, you see, it kind of comes out of this deep divide in the culture over the Roman Empire. We've got to kind of get into a little history in order to understand what's happening here. You see, back in 6 AD, the Roman Empire established what was known as a poll tax on all the Jewish adults, a certain amount of money that had to be paid every year for every Jewish adult. This led to an immediate rebellion, right? Judas the Galilean, who's actually mentioned in Acts chapter 5, led a revolt back in 6 AD, which was eventually squashed. But this revolt led to the creation of the Zealots, who absolutely refused to pay the poll tax and eventually would lead the entire country into rebellion against the Romans in 66 AD and was squashed in 70. And all that time between 6 AD and 66 AD, for 60 years, Galilee is a hotbed for zealots. People who refuse to pay their taxes, people who refuse to submit to Roman rule. And so what we see is that in this Greek word that is being used for taxes is not just a generic word for taxes. They're like, oh, Jesus, should we pay taxes on our food? Should we pay taxes on our gas? Well, because they didn't have gas back then. But, you know what I mean. It was a very specific word. He's saying, Jesus, should we pay the poll tax? Now, this issue was seen as a spiritual issue. The tax was seen as a spiritual issue. It felt like they were putting God's land into the service of foreigners. It's not just a legal issue. It's a moral issue in many ways in their mind. It's not that different from how we evangelicals see abortion. We understand and believe that the killing of unborn children is a moral issue, a moral wrong that should not be allowed. And so, but we often utilize taxes, or not taxes, we often utilize the political system in order to try to accomplish ending that particular issue. So this question was playing into the current political, religious tension of the day that everyone had a strong opinion on. And the trap was two-pronged. One that seemed perfect in their eyes, one that they thought couldn't be dodged. They felt that they had dug a manhole, a pitfall that was in front of Jesus that he could not avoid stepping into. And it was all based on the premise that Jesus was another one of these Galilean zealots. See, they thought that if Jesus said, yes, pay your poll tax, then they felt like that, if that's what he says, then he would lose all the people who supported him, because they believed that all the people who supported him were just more zealots. And so if you tell them pay the poll tax, no one's going to listen to him anymore. On top of that, they thought if he says, yes, pay the poll tax, they thought that would be saying he's not the Messiah, because their thought was the Messiah was going to overthrow the Romans. So if he supports the Roman Empire, he couldn't be the Messiah in their eyes. But if, on the other hand, he says, no, don't pay the poll tax baldly and boldly in the temple courts, then you know what's going to happen. He's going to be guilty of sedition. He could get jailed and eventually executed. In fact, when they're lying about Jesus in his trial a few chapters later, they lie about him and say he told people not to pay the taxes. So their question had nothing to do with an honest search for an answer. Their goal simply was destruction. They were playing that ancient game of dirty, rotten politics. And yes, church politics existed way back before there was even a Christian church. And yes, there have always been people who would take that game and play it in an evil, twisted, dirty way. And they thought they had him. I can almost see the smug looks on their faces thinking, we've got him trapped now. So how is Jesus going to get out of this trap that has been set for him? Well, let's read on. Let's look at this. Verse 15. This is what he says. But knowing their hypocrisy, he said to them, Why put me to the test? Bring me a denarius and let me look at it. And they brought one to him. They brought one. And he said to them, whose likeness and inscription is this? And they said to him, Caesar's. Now, one of the great things that people like about Jesus is his ability to answer questions by asking questions. You know what I mean? Now, Jesus isn't dodging the question altogether. He is going to answer it, but first he wants to kind of broaden their perspective. And a good way to do that is to ask questions. In fact, when we find ourselves in a situation where it may be a trap, the best thing that we can do is to ask honest questions to broaden our view on it. In fact, I was even receiving promos recently about a study that was all based upon asking the right questions. The first line in that email was, I should have asked more questions. How many of you have walked away feeling like from a situation, feeling like, maybe I should have asked more questions there? You know, I know I have. When we find ourselves in a situation dealing with flattery, it is always good to ask more questions. Questions like, do I trust this person? And why do I trust them? And maybe moving on to, what is the goal of what they're asking me to do? What is it that they are asking me? What's the point of it all? Is it harmless, or will it come back to hurt me? Will it come back to hurt God or my family or my church? You know how it is. All parents know how this is, trying to figure out what the goal is, right? We've all been in that situation where the kid comes to us and says, hey, Dad, I love you. And your response is what? I love you too. What do you want? Why do you want it? Essentially, what are the greater implications going on here? And so Jesus is asking these questions, but they're not really for his benefit, because Jesus already understands this in a broader sense. But what he's trying to do is challenge people to think larger than what they are, to ask questions that they should have been asking and hadn't. You know, that's probably a good thing for us to consider, to keep on hand. Maybe the question of, what question should I ask but haven't yet? And Jesus starts by revealing their hypocrisy. He asks them simply to bring a coin, and they bring him one of these coins, and most likely it was a Tiberius denarius. Now I'm going to show you a picture of that coin on the screen here, and it's important to understand this coin, to understand this debate just a little bit better, so it's also going to help you out. So take a look. On the one side, you can see there's the picture of Tiberius Caesar's head, and there's a writing around it. And if you fill in the abbreviations, it says Tiberius Caesar, August, son of the divine Augustus. Now remember, the Roman emperors proclaimed that they were gods, to proclaim that they were divine. And they utilized the coinage as an opportunity to, basically as propaganda, to use them to religious ends. Now, when you flip it over and you look at the backside, right, you see a picture of a woman who is sitting on a throne holding a spear and an olive branch. And the writing around there says, High Priestess. You see, what you begin to see is that these coins really are just a mini idol designed to promote emperor worship. Now, these people had challenged Jesus about whether it is morally right to pay the poll tax, but Jesus shows that they have no problem using Roman coins. They have no problem even carrying what is essentially a mini idol right into the temple courts itself. Ultimately, he begins to show them for the hypocrites that they are, and then he answers them with this simple but powerful statement. Let's look at verse 17. Jesus said to them, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. And they marveled at him. It's interesting that Jesus used the word render. You see, the question was about, should we give taxes to the Romans? But Jesus uses the word render. And that word render implies paying for something for which you've received services for. He's basically saying, look, you are content to use Roman roads. You are willing to use Roman coins, so much so that you're carrying one around with you right now. You are benefiting from the Roman economy. Well, at least the rich are, rich more than the poor are. And you got other benefits from the Romans. Like what? They're protecting you from invaders and things like that. And he's saying, you're not a thief, are you? Then pay them for the services that they have rendered to you. So in essence, he is saying, pay them their taxes, but he's putting it into the perspective of the reality that you're utilizing the things that the Romans are giving you, and you shouldn't be stealing. Go ahead and pay your taxes. And Jesus is also saying, give back to Caesar these many idols that you've been carrying around. They're his. They've got his image. They're his idols. Let him have them back. However, Jesus looks beyond the issue of the tax to the issue of the heart. You see, the coin was made bearing the image of Caesar, but we are made bearing the image of God. So we're to pay back what goes to Caesar because it has his image, but we have the image of God. We need to give to God the things that are God's, which is what? Us. See, Jesus is saying that the Pharisees and the Herodians, they really don't need to understand taxes better. What they really need to understand is their relationship with God, that we owe all to God, ourselves. That's what they needed to grasp better. Jesus is encouraging them they need to get the relationship with God right. Then they will have their relationship with the government figured out. It will be all right. Then, the more importantly than how we respond to the government is how we are responding to God. And that is what Jesus wants them to understand. And although Caesar deserves his money, God deserves our everything. And thus, our greater duty is to God, and even how we interact with the government flows out of what? Our relationship with God and following his principles and his guidance. And so in these three short statements, we see Jesus effectively avoid a trap that seemed unavoidable, that seemed imminent. And what are the principles that we learn here? First off, we see, number one, we recognize that we need to see the flattery for what it is. Whether it is obviously coming from an enemy, like in this case, or the enemy of the world, or a friend or a loved one, we need to pause and recognize flattery when it comes. Like the world uses flattery all the time to try to get us to what? Buy their things and do what they would want us to do. They tell us, oh, you deserve this or that, right? Don't you just love that when you hear that? You deserve this. And you can then sit back and go, wait, why do I deserve it? And they're saying, basically, you're a smart, hard-working person, a self-sacrificer who hasn't gotten all that you deserve. And when we look at flattery, we begin to realize that it's kind of like giving candy to a child to convince them to do something. You know, when we first, when Bridget and I were married and young parents, first married and young parents, and we were attending a church where people didn't put their kids in the nursery after a certain age. They just sat in the church with them. And so in order to get them to be quiet, our child to be quiet, they would sit there, and if they stayed quiet for so long, we'd give them a little Smartie type of thing, and then they'd have to wait some more and give them Smarties. Like, just give them candy to get them to do what we want. And the reality is flattery is like that. It's giving us what we want, what makes us feel good in order to try to get us to do the things that they want us to do. And the flattery can even be true. You're probably hardworking and self-sacrificing. I know that you're smart. Jesus was exactly what they said he was, but that doesn't mean it wasn't flattery. So let's recognize flattery for what it is, and that's a really hard thing. It's something that takes time. It's something that takes moments where we pull away and think about it. But secondly, we need to pause and ask questions. Sometimes that helps us recognize the flattery when we start to ask questions, probe into the situation, find out more. You know, I recently read about a pastor who, along with his partner, pled guilty to fraud. For selling historic Chinese bonds. He insisted that he had been deceived too, that he honestly believed that these bonds were legitimate investment opportunities, that he never wanted to defraud anybody. And if that's true, then the reality is he didn't ask enough questions. He didn't probe deep enough to figure out what was going on. And with a few questions, we can begin to get a better idea of what is happening, what is going on, why are we being asked to do this, and sometimes begin to understand even our own hearts better. One of the questions that would be wise for us to ask is, why do I want to do this or not want to do this? Why do I believe this? Why do I want to believe this, etc.? And is that motive, is that desire God glorifying? Why? Because the last thing is to see the issue through the eyes of the kingdom of God, the greater picture. Does what we're being asked to do, is this trap that is set before us, does it cause us to go against the principles of God's kingdom, of loving God, loving others, making disciples? Does it violate our dedication to God first? If those things, we can answer those things well, then we begin to ask the question, is it wise? But we need to see this issue through the eyes of the kingdom. You see, the reality is the world is full of traps, but we serve a great and glorious God, one who is true, one who is loving, one who can carry us safely through the traps. Because the reality is, I'm not trying to shame people who have been trapped, because I think we all have. There's all times in which we have fallen into that trap and woken up, a little bit later going, why did I do that? Why did I make that decision? Why did I say those things? Why did I respond in this way? The question we have to ask ourselves is, are we being used? Are we being flattered into doing things for others? We need to ask ourselves good questions and ask God, what do you want? What is good? And then we can begin to let go of all else. Let's pray. Father, we come before you and we just thank you, Lord, for this simple truth, for this reality. I pray, Father, that you would help us just to begin to ask wise questions about ourselves, wise questions about what's being asked of us and the motives. And we ask, Father, that we would just be able to respond in a way that brings glory to you. We ask these things in your name.